What's going on YouTube? Taylor back here with another fun video for you.
This is the hour, the darkest place. Dante's Inferno, the devil's maze. It's a good world, good world gone bad.
What's going on YouTube? Today we're going to take a look at what is arguably my most powerful deck of all time, and that would be my Rogue Strategy Venom deck. You might be wondering to yourself, Taylor, why do you have such a small extra deck? And I'll tell you, there's a very valid reason for that. I don't use links at all. My friends and I, when we play, we use our complete Rogue strategies. No one plays meta. In fact, we're almost anti-meta, or removed from meta.
Remove. Please.
I only use 2 extra deck monsters because, to be honest, they're the only extra deck monsters that I have that actually fit this archetype, and they're just beautiful when they work together. They're so in sync, and I will get into that in this review today. So without further ado, let's take a look. Now before we get into the explanation as to why this deck is so powerful as a rogue strategy, there is some writing on the wall I'd like to take care of. That writing on the wall would be this card right here, Venom Swamp. I'll break down the card's effect and then we'll talk about why it's so good. Venom Swamp is a field spell card. Monsters lose 5 on attack for each Venom counter on them. Destroy a monster if its attack becomes 0 by this effect. During each player's end phase, place 1 Venom counter on each face-up monster except for Venom monsters. Now you'll see as we go through this deck, the Venom deck circulates entirely around this field spell card. Basically, we take our time applying Venom counters to various cards in the field, mostly opponent monsters, unless mine fall into the same bracket. And these monsters are then destroyed by this card effect. It's great for breaking down beatdown decks. It's great for basically any strategy that involves clipping monsters on the opponent's side of the field and ensuring that my side of the field is protected. So without further ado, let's take a look at this deck. First, we'll talk about monsters. We have 1 copy of Venom Swamp, the deity of poisonous snakes. This card cannot be normal summon, however it can be special summon with the effect of Rise of the Snake Deity. I'll get into that effect later on. But as for Venom Swamp, he or she gains 500 attack for every reptile in the graveyard. Because it's a reptile deck, this is very good, because every monster that I send to the graveyard will of course empower him or her. It cannot be targeted by and is unaffected by spell or trap effects and monster effects. Affect monsters only, not extra deck stuff. When it's destroyed by battle, I can banish 1 reptile type to special summon this card back to the field. Additionally, when this card inflicts battle damage, I can place 1 hyper venom counter on this card. So not normal venom counters, but hyper venom counters. And once I have 3 hyper venom counters on her, I win the duel. Now that is one of the main strategies for winning with this deck. However, it is not the only one, and I'll explain why. Next up we have 2 copies of Venomenon, the King of Poisonous Snakes. Now this guy is very similar to his deity over here, in that he cannot be special summoned and is unaffected by Venom Swamp. He gains 500 attack for each reptile in the graveyard. And when he's destroyed by battle, I can banish 1 reptile type instead to bring him back to the field. An effect that goes wonderfully with this deck. I love it. Mwah.
Come here.
Following Phenomenon, we get into the more basic effect monsters that will in fact deal venom counters. First up we have a 5-star, Venom Boa. His effect is once per turn you can place 2 venom counters on 1 monster your opponent controls, and if you activate this effect, this card cannot attack during that turn. Because this deck isn't exactly offensive, that isn't too big of a burn to not be able to attack, but placing 2 venom counters is very, very important. Next up we have 3 copies of Venom Serpent. This little guy is a little more simplistic in that he's a 4-star, and his effect is once per turn you can place one Venom counter on one monster your opponent controls. So as you can see, if I have multiple Venom monsters in play, they do in fact stack on each other, and I can basically, if need be, in certain cases, eliminate monsters completely in one turn, which is just amazing. Another stupendous card that I run 3 copies of in this deck would be Venom Snake. Now with Venom Snake, oddly enough, for the longest time I had 2, but could not run 3 because I could not find one anywhere. Be it locally or online, I could not find 3 copies, the 3rd copy of this guy. His effect is as follows. Once per turn you can place one Venom counter on one monster your opponent controls. If you activate this effect, this card cannot attack during this turn. Again, not a very offensive deck, so not attacking isn't necessarily a bad idea. I'd like you also to take note that there are 3 stars for Venom Snake, which will come into play later on. Continuing with Venom monsters, we have the last of the archetype, which would be Venom Cobra. I like to run 3 copies of him just because he's got great defense. This guy can't, of course, add any Venom counters to my opponent's monsters, but he's a good defense stick nonetheless. Let's just adjust that.
2 hours later.
Beautiful. I like to run 2 copies of Razor Lizard. This little guy's effect is as follows. While you control another reptile-type monster, if this card attacks a face-down defense position monster, destroy the monster immediately with this card's effect without flipping it face-up or applying damage calculation. This is great for quick removal of enemy monsters that are in defense that you just don't think you can get around if you happen to know what they are.
It's been evicted.
Or if you just don't want to worry about losing your Razor Lizard. Additionally, he's the other set of monsters in this deck that are 3 stars. So in total I have 5 3-star monsters in this deck to play with. Next we have 2 copies of Reptilian Gardna. This guy's effect is as follows. When this card you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, add 1 Reptilian monster from your deck to your hand. Because I run the 2 of them, they have great synergy together in that if one is destroyed I can then pull the other one, and continue having effective reptile-type monsters in my hand. Lovely.
This is a process. It's a process. It's a process.
As for the final monster that is in this main deck, we have 1 copy of Serpentine Princess. Her effect is as follows. If this face-up card is returned directly from the field to your deck, special summon 1 3 or lower monster from your deck. Now, if she's returned to the field, I can then, return.
Then what the fuck are you talking about, man?
Return to my hand, I can then pull either one of my copies of Razor Lizard or Venom Snake and special summon them, which of course is great because if I get that extra special summon of a Venom Snake, I can then apply an extra Venom counter that turn, which is just oodles of fun. So I'll pack these guys away and
Pack your shit! Pack your shit!
next we'll talk about spell cards. Like with any good deck that falls under an archetype or basically lives and breathed by a field spell, I do run 3 copies of Venom Swamp, which is the one that of course allows me to apply free Venom counters to opponent's monsters. I like to run 1 copy of Terraforming. This of course allows me to search one of my 3 Venom Swamps from my deck and add it to my hand. And then I like to run 2 copies of Burden of the Mighty. Now this card's effect, each face-up monster your opponent controls loses 100 attack times its own level. So for instance, if you have a level 4-star monster, it would lose 400 attack on top of the Venom counters that are in play. So these 2 cards, when they're face-up on the field, they just help me get that much closer to destroying monsters on my opponent's side of the field that much quicker. Following those cards, we have some normal spell cards. First up, we have Snake Rain.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking...
Discard 1 card, select 4 reptile-type monsters from your deck, and send them to the graveyard. Of course, if I happen to have my big boss monster, the King of Snakes, out, and I want to give him that extra boost of extra attack, I can just toss some reptiles in the graveyard, and boom, instant attack power. Next up, I like to run 1 copy of Trade-In, discard 1 level 8 monster to draw 2 cards. Great if you want to have that extra card advantage. Next we have 1 copy of Dark Hole, because who doesn't love to clip the field really quick if need be. Following that, we have a copy of Creature Swap in case I want to steal a card from my opponent or give them one of my lower cards to effectively attack and destroy. One copy of Swords of Revealing Light because this card is very handy in a tight pinch. And finally, we have one quick play spell in Mystical Space Typhoon. I will most likely be upgrading this to a copy of Twin Twisters at some point, but for now, Misty helps me annihilate my opponents fairly effectively. Okay, moving on to traps. I like to run 2 copies of Rise of the Snake Deity.
Snakes.
This is that trap card that allows me to summon my Big Deity card. His effect is as follows. Activate only when a face-up Phenomenon, the king of poisonous snakes you control, is destroyed. Special summon one Venomenaga, the deity of poisonous snakes, from your hand or deck. I just love that card art, it looks so cool. Next up we have 2 copies of Offering to the Snake Deity.
Why did it have to be snakes?
Destroy one reptile-type monster you control and 2 cards your opponent controls. Basically a slower Twin Twisters that happens to work quite effectively in this deck. Continuing with normal trap cards, we have 1 copy of Ambush Fangs. Activate only when a face-up Venom monster you control is declared as an attack target. Negate the attack and end the battle phase. Then place 1 additional Venom counter on the monster that attacked. Lovely. And 1 copy of Damage Condenser. When you take battle damage, discard 1 card. Special summon 1 monster from your deck with attack less than or equal to the battle damage you took in face-up attack position. So because a majority of my Venom monsters and reptiles are quite low in attack, I think the highest one might be 1400? No, Venom Bow is 1600. Because of that, the attack damage itself is usually quite low unless they have a boss monster outright. So with that in mind, this card's great for pulling out small Venom monsters when I need them. Next up, I have 3 counter trap cards. Whoop.
Build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me. Nobody builds walls better than me.
First up being 7 Tools of the Bandit, which of course is a classic. When a trap card is activated, pay 1000 LP. Negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. I don't care much about life points because I have a way of recycling them, you'll see. So that card's amazing. Next up we have Snake Deity's Command. Activate by showing your opponent 1 Venom monster in your hand, negate the activation and effect of an opponent's spell card, and destroy it. Another classic card here, Solemn Warning.
Tolerance doesn't live here anymore.
When a monster or monsters would be summoned, or when a spell card, trap card, or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster or monsters, pay 2000 life points, negate the summon or activation, and if you do, destroy that card. One of my favorites. And finally, to round off my trap cards, we will talk about my continuous trap cards. So first up, we have a copy of Solemn Wishes. You gain 500 life points when you draw a card or cards. Fantastic card that comes in handy in a pinch. 1 copy of Gravity Bind. All level 4 or higher monsters in the field cannot attack. This just helps out with the Venom Swamp effect, of course, because if my opponent can't attack, he will just continually keep losing monsters if they're face up in attack position if this card's face up in the field, because once Venom Swamp's out, and I've got Venom cards out there in the field playing around with those Venom counters, there really is nothing they can do at that point. And my final trap card for this deck is none other than Limit Reverse. Target 1 monster with 1000 or less attack in your graveyard. Special summon it in attack position. If the target is changed to defense position, destroy it and discard. When this card leaves the field, destroy the target. When the target is destroyed, destroy this card. So basically it's a Call the Haunted for our little guys. Very handy when I have my lower attack reptile monsters. So now I will clear these away, and then we'll talk about those 2 god tier extra deck monsters. Are you guys ready for this? Drum roll, please. Here we have the 2 monsters that I run in my extra deck. Level 4, Gaga Gigo, the Risen. You'll see with an attack of 2,950 and a defense of 2,800, all for the sacrifice of 3 level 4 monsters. What can I say about this guy? He speaks for himself. That is without a doubt, one of the best cards in the game. Fight me.
What the fuck is up, Kyle? No, what did you say, dude? What the fuck, dude? Step the fuck up, Kyle!
The other card I like to run to completely annihilate, desecrate, and annoy my opponents would be King of the Feral Imps, another level 4 Xyz monster. With an attack of 2300 and a defense of 2000, and all for the small cost of 2 level 4 monsters. Once per turn I can detach one Xyz material from this card, add one reptile type monster from my deck to my hand. Now, everyone loves searching effects, so I can't imagine a deck that wouldn't benefit from that sort of effect. Now, with these 2 cards in my possession, there's quite literally nothing the opponent can do. Nothing at all. This is the best strategy I can come up with. Fight me.
Dude, step the fuck up, Kyle!
So, there you have it, folks. That is, without a doubt, the most powerful deck that I run right now in my rogue strategy. I have dueled exactly once with this deck, and I have won exactly once with this deck. So, I win 100% of the duels.
We've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
That I have with this deck. So really, the argument cannot be made that a person should not run this deck. It's just, it's God tier. What can I say? I know I say God tier too often, but this deck is actually up there in the tier of gods. And that is the honest to God truth. Thank you so much for joining me today, folks. I had a lot of fun talking about this stupid little deck. I'm hoping to keep the channel on schedule and that each week we'll have a brand new video for you, most likely uploaded on Thursdays or Fridays. And I hope to take a look at the Dark Neostorm booster box relatively soon. And I'd like to go through that box and keep my hunt for the danger cards successful. I think there's two spell cards in that box that we're gonna try and pull. But anyway, thanks so much again, folks, for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye.